Okay, let's unpack this. When you picture science, what comes to mind? I mean, maybe those images of scientists in white lab coats,
Yeah.
or maybe the idea of this perfect, flawless logic leading to certain undeniable answers.
Right, that very clean, objective image.
It's pretty easy, I think, to see science as this almost robotic pursuit, totally separate from the messy reality of human life.
That is the common picture, isn't it? This sort of untouchable ivory tower of pure facts.
Yeah.
But when you really dig into the history and the philosophy behind science, like our sources do here, you find something else. Its true greatness actually comes from something far more human, maybe even counterintuitive, and definitely not always neat and tidy.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this stack of material we're looking at so compelling. It takes us beyond just memorizing facts and figures and
Mhm.
gets into the very nature of science itself.
It really challenges that simple image. It invites us, you, to see science not as just this static body of knowledge, but as a dynamic, evolving process.
Yeah.
A specific way of engaging with the world,
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
and something profoundly connected to who we are as thinking beings.
So, our mission for this deep dive is to get into these sources and try to understand what science really is. Not just a collection of facts you cram for a test,
Definitely.
but a human journey, an essential attitude, really, and a perspective that links us to the universe in ways you might not expect. Get ready for some serious aha moments, I think, about something you might have thought you already had figured out.
Okay, so let's start by maybe really dismantling that idea of science being built in some perfect ivory tower.
Yeah, let's do that.
Our sources make it pretty clear.
Mhm.
It's not created by flawless beings seeking absolute truth in total isolation.
Right, take someone like Isaac Newton. We hold him up as, arguably the founder of modern physics, calculus, optics, a
Uh,
giant.
Absolutely.
Right.
Foundational.
But these sources, they paint a much richer, messier picture. Newton, this titan of rational science, also spent a huge chunk of his life deep into alchemy, seriously trying to turn lead into gold.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it?
Mm,
And he worked as a mint inspector too, hunting counterfeiters.
yeah. And he himself apparently described his scientific work more like a hobby, at least early on. It just shows there were complex, very human drivers behind his work, not just pure dispassionate logic.
And that very human journey, it stands on some fundamental pillars. The first one, as our sources really emphasize, is this concept of science building on a vast library of knowledge.
Ah, right.
No scientist, no matter how brilliant, starts from zero, basically.
Yeah.
They stand on the shoulders of giants, leveraging all the accumulated understanding from generations before them.
It's like Carl Sagan pointed out, the invention of archiving, of
Yeah.
libraries, the ability to store and pass on knowledge across time. That was absolutely fundamental.
Key to human progress.
Set us apart from other species. It's the essential foundation everything else gets built on.
But just building on the past isn't the whole story. The second, and maybe the most crucial pillar, is science's incredible power of self-correction.
Okay, self-correction.
And this isn't presented as a weakness or a flaw. It's actually framed as its greatest strength. Science isn't afraid to admit it was wrong, to tear down old ideas when new evidence comes along.
That willingness to admit error, it feels so counterintuitive sometimes, doesn't it? Especially with all the pressures today. How does science actually manage that self-correction in practice? I mean, isn't it incredibly hard for someone to say, oops, my life's work might be based on a flawed premise?
Oh, it absolutely can be difficult.
Yeah.
And, human ego is always a factor, let's be real.
Sure.
But the process of science, things like peer review, replication of experiments by different labs, that constant skeptical questioning within the community, it's built precisely to try and overcome that individual bias. It's a collective effort, you see.
Okay.
And you really see the power of this when you contrast, say, astrology and astronomy.
Ah, that example from the sources is perfect. Astrology started by observing the stars, right? Using actual data.
Yeah, initially.
But when the predicted links between, I don't know, star positions and human destiny just weren't showing up reliably,
It failed to adapt. It failed to abandon its core framework. It clung to its initial premise, and so it remained a pseudoscience.
whereas astronomy,
Astronomy, however, was essentially born by discarding that old astrological framework. It corrected itself. It threw out hypotheses that weren't supported by evidence. Science, fundamentally, is this ongoing process of admitting error and building new, hopefully better, theories on the ashes of discarded hypotheses. That's a great phrase from the sources.
Ashes of discarded hypotheses. I like that. And here's something else fascinating. The sources point out these great scientific leaps. They don't only come from that intense logical grind.
No, sometimes breakthroughs emerge from totally unexpected moments of rest and inspiration.
The stories are brilliant. Heisenberg and Schrodinger, pioneers who laid the groundwork for quantum mechanics.
Huge figures.
The uncertainty principle, the wave equation. They didn't have their big aha moments staring at complex equations in a lab.
No, they found that foundational inspiration while they were both, get this, on holiday.
Literally on vacation.
Yeah.
Just stepping away allowed their minds to, I guess, connect things that sheer logical rigor hadn't managed to.
Yeah, it really reinforces that science is this deeply human endeavor
Right.
involving complex people like Newton,
Right.
built on that shared library of knowledge, constantly correcting itself through this rigorous process, and sometimes advanced by these lucky moments of inspiration, even when you're supposed to be relaxing by the sea or something.
So its true power isn't in claiming infallibility, but in its, what did the source call it? Courageous flexibility.
Exactly, that willingness to admit error and adapt. That's the core strengths.
Okay, so that's the process, the
Yeah.
human journey of science. But these sources also frame science in a completely different way, too, as an attitude, a fundamental way of thinking about the world.
Mhm.
And they hold up Carl Sagan as, the ultimate embodiment of this.
Yeah, he's a great example here. We often reduce science to just the facts, right? The distance to Mars, the stages of mitosis.
The stuff you memorize.
Exactly.
Mhm.
But those are just the results, the output. The core idea here is that science is fundamentally a procedure and an attitude.
Okay.
It's about forming hypotheses, testing them rigorously through observation and experiment, and crucially, maintaining a stance of constant doubt and questioning.
And Sagan, even though his gaze was fixed on the unimaginable scale of the universe,
Yeah, the cosmos.
he always brought it back home, didn't he? Circling back to humanity. His exploration of the cosmos was ultimately a path to understanding ourselves.
He saw the universe's greatest virtues, apparently, as time and humans.
Yeah.
The sheer fact that intelligent life, us, emerged over 13.8 billion years was, to him, this absolutely marvelous, almost improbable cosmic event.
And he used these grand cosmic narratives,
Yeah.
Darwin's natural selection over vast time, the origin of life from non-living matter, even thinking about the possibility of alien life.
Big ideas.
To make us think, to push us to reflect on our own existence, asking that fundamental question, who are we?
And his intellectual flexibility, his open-mindedness were just remarkable. He had this lifelong partnership with his wife, Anne Druyan, who, is a devout believer.
Right.
And he was always willing to engage deeply and respectfully in dialogue with religious people.
Yeah.
He wasn't dismissive.
There's even that quote in the sources suggesting that if he'd lived back in the 1700s, he might have been a pastor. That really makes you pause, doesn't it?
It does. It shows he wasn't some, dogmatic science supremacist. He seemed to genuinely respect the human impulse behind all sorts of truth-seeking questions.
Absolutely. And he wasn't afraid to just ask these bold what-if questions, taking people on these incredible intellectual adventures.
Like, what would beings from another planet call life on Earth? Or what unexpected roles did things like oxygen toxicity or the emergence of sex play in the deep, deep history of human civilization?
He even advised on the movie Contact, right? Exploring the scientific plausibility of things like wormhole travel. Just very open, very exploratory.
Exactly. Sagan showed us that science isn't this rigid, finished product of established knowledge.
No.
It's a humble, courageous, ongoing journey of constantly questioning the universe, life, and our own place within it all. It's not facts frozen in a textbook. It's this endless living process of using the cosmos as a kind of mirror to understand humans.
That focus on constant questioning and the human perspective, like Sagan embodied, it sounds really powerful. But let's be honest, for many of us, we're drawn to science because it seems to offer solid ground, right?
That's certainly
Those right answers, especially when the world feels so uncertain. And that, the sources point out, is where a potential danger lies.
Yeah, it's easy to gravitate towards science because that promise of right answers feels like a liberation from doubt. It offers a kind of psychological stability.
But the dangerous illusion comes from confusing the facts of nature with the values we choose for human society, what ought to be?
Right, this is the classic naturalistic fallacy.
Okay, the naturalistic fallacy. So that's like taking a scientific observation, maybe. In the animal world, we observe survival of the fittest, and then jumping to say, therefore, human society should be a winner-take-all competition. Is that the kind of thing?
That's exactly the kind of deep gap the sources talk about. Science describes how the world appears to work, in certain contexts anyway, the eyes,
Right.
but it doesn't, and it really cannot, tell us how we should live or organize our human societies, the ought. There's this profound gap between natural fact and human value that we have to cross really carefully with critical thinking. It's not a jump you can just make automatically.
And the sources suggest our science education might even, maybe inadvertently, contribute to this confusion.
Oh, so?
Well, by often highlighting the most dramatic, easily testable parts, like, say, the visually engaging division phase of a cell dividing,
The exciting bit.
while maybe neglecting the quiet majority of its life cycle, the interphase. This can give a sort of distorted view, making science seem like it's all about finding predetermined, dramatic answers, all packaged up neatly.
And what gets left out in that picture? Well, the fundamentally uncertain, probabilistic world of quantum mechanics, for one, where things aren't always deterministic,
Yeah.
or the microscopic world that our everyday human language, with words like particle or wave, just can't fully capture without running into paradoxes.
So the paradox is, if we only focus on teaching science as finding answers, we might actually foster an anti-scientific mindset by missing the nuance.
Precisely,
Right.
by failing to teach the most crucial scientific attitude, which is humility regarding uncertainty and self-doubt.
So what is the true scientific attitude then, if it's not just about having all the answers?
It's really the willingness to honestly admit ignorance, like calling the origin of the universe a singularity because, well, we don't have a complete explanation yet.
Okay.
It's accepting the probabilistic nature of reality at the quantum level, even if it made giants like Einstein deeply uncomfortable. Remember his famous line, "God does not play dice"? That was him wrestling with that uncertainty.
Right.
The history of science isn't really a simple march towards absolute certain truth. It's more like a humble journey of constantly doubting and revising existing beliefs based on new evidence.
So the real wisdom we gain from science isn't the perceived liberation of having the definitive answer,
No.
but rather the humility of knowing this might not be the only answer, or maybe not even the right one eventually.
Yes. It's respecting scientific facts for the powerful descriptions they are, but also being super vigilant about guarding against the temptation to apply them recklessly as prescriptions or blueprints for human values.
Understanding that gap.
Understanding that gap is essential. It lets us use the sharp tool of science wisely, without falling into arrogance. The true liberation science offers isn't certainty. It's maybe the freedom to ask better questions about everything.
And speaking of asking better questions and really connecting science to humanity, let's talk about Carl Sagan's most famous work, Cosmos.
Ah, yes. That opening line.
Yeah.
It's just legendary, isn't it? The cosmos is all that is or ever was or ever will be.
It really is. Our sources describe how powerful that was for people, how it could literally stop someone in their tracks, making them unable to turn the page for days, just overwhelmed by its sheer grandeur.
And the power isn't just in the scope of the statement itself, but specifically in Sagan's deliberate choice of that one word, cosmos.
Right. Why cosmos? Why was that choice so significant compared to just saying space or universe?
Ah, that's key. Space is just, physical area where rockets fly. Empty volume, almost.
Yeah.
Universe is often treated like a physical object governed by cold and different laws like gravity. Something existing, whether we're here to see it or not.
Objective and detached,
Yeah.
kind of cold.
Exactly. But cosmos is different. Etymologically, it's the opposite of chaos. It implies an ordered, harmonious world. And crucially, embedded in that concept of cosmos is the idea of intellectual beings. It includes us, the observers who contemplate this order. We're part of the harmony.
Wow. So by choosing Cosmos, Sagan really transformed his book. It wasn't just explaining astronomical facts.
No.
It became this profound philosophical exploration of the relationship between human consciousness and the entire sweep of existence.
And think about his courage back then, back in 1980 when Cosmos first came out. Not a single planet outside our solar system had been definitively discovered yet.
Right. Incredible to think now.
But Sagan boldly stated, based on the science of star formation as he understood it, that planets must form alongside stars and that life would likely evolve on many of them. At that time, that idea was considered almost heretical by quite a few people.
And yet he patiently worked to explain complex ideas like evolution to a really broad public, didn't he? Expanding the simple principle of selective breeding across billions of years in unimaginable timescales.
He understood there might be emotional resistance to these ideas, but he persisted with clear, compelling explanation. He met people where they were.
So his cosmos wasn't a cold, empty universe that just excluded humans, governed only by abstract laws.
No, it was presented as an ordered, harmonious world where we aren't just observers of the whole, but an integral part of it, and importantly, a cosmos that gains deeper meaning precisely because we exist within it to perceive and understand its wonders.
That's it. The real power of that opening line, the cosmos is all that is or ever was or ever will be, is its profound declaration that you, the listener, are inextricably connected to that entire vast history of time and space.
Mm.
It takes the potentially cold, indifferent universe and makes it our meaningful home, our shared cosmos.
So, to kind of wrap up our deep dive here, science isn't some perfect objective tower built by flawless beings,
Definitely not.
but a messy, deeply human, self-correcting journey built on accumulated knowledge and sometimes advanced by these unexpected moments of inspiration.
And it's not merely a list of fixed facts, but fundamentally a humble, courageous attitude. An attitude of constantly questioning, empirically testing, and crucially, embracing doubt.
And it demands vigilance from us
Right.
in distinguishing the facts of nature from the values we choose for human society,
Right.
navigating that really critical gap carefully.
And ultimately, it reveals our profound, maybe even startling connection to the entire ordered whole of existence, the cosmos, showing us we are not just apart from it, but integral parts of its unfolding story.
So, if the true power and wisdom of science comes not from those definitive, certain answers we sometimes crave,
Right.
but from embracing uncertainty, honestly admitting ignorance, and learning to ask better questions about ourselves and our place in the cosmos.
What long-held answers, maybe in your own life or your field, are you ready to humbly question? What new what-if questions are just waiting out there for you to explore?